Please take your seats quickly, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Tennis Weekly with Joel, Kim and Chris. On today's French Open quarterfinal catch-up, sponsored by downloadtennis.com.
Ruud rallies past Rune.
Sabalenka steamrolls into the semis.
And we get Alcaraz Djokovic at a slam.
Chris, today is the 8th of June and we are here to catch up on all the quarterfinal action from the French Open here at Tennis Weekly HQ. It's just me and you today. Joel is otherwise occupied. And actually, we're recording later, so it feels a bit like a night session for Tennis Weekly HQ. I've just come in from a quiz night and I have to say...
How did you do?
Well, I have to say I was successful. I'm the proud owner of a signed Ottolenghi cookbook, which is exciting.
Wonderful recipes in there.
So I'm very much identifying with all of the winners of the quarterfinal matches at the French
You are
Open.
a Tennis Weekly winner. You may not have won Collector Set, Kim, but you have won the pub quiz.
I've won in some capacity, so the winning feeling is strong here at Tennis Weekly HQ. But yeah, it's nice to catch up with you, Chris, because you're back from Paris now.
Yes.
Very much enjoyed hearing about your antics out on the clay.
It's been a while, Kim, hasn't it?
It has. How have you been finding life back in Denmark now you've returned from your exploits?
Thankfully, the weather's still warm here, which is wonderful. But I meant to say, I did send a picture, obviously, on the group of myself holding or waving the Spanish flag. And I was going to kind of, because I know that you've got a history of turning up at matches with props, Spanish props. And I thought, surely I need to try and do something here to kind of bring that Tennis Weekly mantle to the Carlos Alcaraz match, because that's as close to a Nadal match, in my head, logically, we could get. And they actually confiscated the stick my flag was on. They ripped it off in front of me because it was a dangerous weapon. So that is why people just have the flags they wave, not the sticks, because they are confiscated, which was a bit soul-destroying watching the flag you just bought for €4 being ripped apart, but still waved it. So thought I'd give you that update.
It was the thought that counts. I saw your nice, I think you sent me a nice photo of the flag against, I'm guessing that it was the River Seine.
Yes, I was waving all
Paris.
Around Paris, Kim, just getting ready for the match.
You. Representing Team Rafa, despite the fact that he's not there, but I guess Team Alcaraz maybe.
I did visit the statue.
Kind of the next best thing. You did visit the statue. Thank you. You've
it is right
paid homage
when you enter. It's almost everyone must see that. Maybe even the players walk past and see this wonderful metal statue of Rafa, and very popular, almost more popular than some of the outside courts. Getting a picture there,
Ooh,
so
well,
his presence is still felt and missed.
Yes, yeah, it has been a weird French Open without Rafa, as I'm sure many Nadal fans will attest to. But we do have a semi-final lineup on, the men's and the women's side. And let's get on to the men's action. First of all, we've had the quarterfinals all finished. And we do have that long anticipated match finally at a Grand Slam between Carlos Alcaraz and Novak Djokovic. They've been trading the world number one slot for the last year, it seems, but they're finally going to meet at a Grand Slam. And they both made it there in slightly different fashion. Djokovic coming through in 4 sets over Karen Khachanov. Carlos Alcaraz coming through very comfortably over Stefanos Tsitsipas. Those matches were yesterday. They will be joined in the semi-finals by Sasha Zverev and Casper Ruud. But I guess let's get into, the Alcaraz and Djokovic sort of matches from the other day. Let's start with Djokovic, who, he's my pick for the title. I think he's still going to win. You can't deny the experience of 22 slams, in my opinion, regardless of Alcaraz's youth and potential. But here we go. We have Djokovic, in his quarterfinal against Khachanov, dropping his first set of the tournament, and for the first 2 sets, probably not being the better player. So, Chris, what did you make of Djokovic's performance overall? He came through in 4 sets in the end, but do you think he was at some point in that match at risk, or do you think it was just kind of par for the course that over the distance he was bound to come through?
Yeah, it was a funny one because I think probably, despite winning the first set and making, well, as you say, playing the better tennis in the second set, I don't think anyone really thought that Khachanov was going to still win that match. I mean, even if he won that second set, I still would have put money on Djokovic to win the match. And we've seen him do it time and time again. When he might have lost a set, he does come back, he does bounce back and play much better tennis. But that tiebreak was really, really edgy from Khachanov. And I think it's one of those tests which you face in majors where he is doing really well at getting to the later rounds, but someone like Djokovic can really switch up the gears, and he did after that tie break.
Yeah, I mean, the experience just showing at that tie break, he was 7 and 0. Like,
yeah.
It was just really raising his game when it mattered the most. And then I think, when it got to sets 3 and 4, it was sort of very standard Djokovic. And I personally still think, if he's fully fit, he is still the favourite. And I'm really, eagerly anticipating this long-awaited match at a Grand Slam between him and Alcaraz. But I just think, given what we've seen from Djokovic, he's had a very comfortable path through the tournament, and maybe he hasn't been tested enough. Maybe this sort of little mini test from Khachanov will actually help him, before the Alcaraz match. But I don't know. I still think he is the one to watch. I mean, he is attempting to reach his 7th final from his last 8 Grand Slam outings. So that is some, his feats kind of speak for themselves, really. I know Alcaraz obviously had that easy match against Tsitsipas. It went to a tiebreak in the third set, but the first 2 sets were just an absolute,
annihilation, really.
Demolition.
Yeah.
So do you think, given what we saw from Alcaraz against Tsitsipas, that Djokovic has to, how worried should Djokovic be based on how well he's playing versus how well Alcaraz is playing?
I think it's a case where we don't often get to see kind of these players ever really play against each other. And it's very weird that on the men's tour, a lot of these players haven't been drawn against each other for various scheduling reasons, because of the nature of absences, because of certain rules and restrictions. So I think it's great to have this matchup either way. And I think in terms of what I'm hoping for from a result, or what I'm kind of expecting, I'm really on the fence with this one. And I'm hoping for a 5-set match and that it does live up to the hype, because there is so much hype. But in terms of the level, I do think that Carlos, and I've made some awful predictions, Kim. I said Musetti was going to take out Carlos, and that was also a demolition job. So it would be an upset, but not an upset on paper in terms of the seedings. But I do think that Carlos has played the better session. And in that Tsitsipas match, I mean, he was 6-2, 6-1 and 5-2 up, I think, in the third, before kind of Tsitsipas did sort of awaken and start to play some better tennis and get that to a tiebreak. But that was a bit scary at times from a level perspective, from a movement perspective, and from a serving perspective. And against the world number 5, that is the toughest quarterfinal that you can get as a seed. And he really did make Tsitsipas look pretty ordinary, which I don't think any of us were really expecting.
Yeah, the gulf between Alcaraz and Tsitsipas in those first 2 sets was just so wide, and yeah, it was almost a bit embarrassing, really, for Tsitsipas. Being the number 5 seed, like you said, being the closest, really, on paper matchup that you're going to get in the quarterfinal stage. He was down 5-2 and double match point in that third set, managed to claw it back to a tiebreak, which was impressive, that he sort of made a bit of a run in that third set. But it was just one-way traffic for the vast majority of the match. And Tsitsipas is a former finalist at this tournament, knows his way around a clay court, is one of typically the tour's best clay courters, and he was just completely outplayed. He's sort of since come out and said that he needs to cut out naps and melatonin, implying that he was just basically asleep on the court for those first 2 sets, which is not great. You need to plan your schedule around your sleep and make sure you're sort of able to be energized from the word go, really. But perhaps that's a routine issue. He's had a few sort of late nights and late night sessions and things, but it's kind of something you've got to deal with on the tour on these days, and unfortunately. But it was just one-way traffic, and I do wonder if Carlos Alcaraz can perform like that. Djokovic is someone who is obviously going to be an absolute step up from Tsitsipas, but I think we're on for an absolute cracker come Friday. And I mean, I hope we get that, because everyone, tennis fans and neutrals aside, we're all kind of looking to that match thinking this is what we need to set the tournament alight.
I think we do need that for the tournament. I think a few people at this sort of stage, though there have been some really great matchups earlier on, we've had a bit of a lull at some of the mid-period of the tournament where there's been quite a lot of straight sets matches and matches that had top billing that didn't necessarily prove to be as kind of hotly contested. I mean, we've seen that with there's a lot of hype around the repeat of the final for Iga and Coco, we'll talk about later, which didn't really live up to it as well. So I do think we need a 5-set match where people are playing well throughout, which hasn't really happened. But on the Tsitsipas comments on kind of the fact he was almost asleep on court, you have to think that this is as big as it gets really in tennis, a quarterfinal at a slam, and there's not really an excuse that you were asleep or that you didn't really think that you were able to be awake because you took a nap, or it just seems very, very odd. And I think that he's making excuses there because I don't think that you should be asleep 5 minutes before you turn up on court. I'm not sure that's the norm. And the match starts at 8:15. So I don't know, Kim, are you taking naps during the day? Is it affecting your performance?
I am not a napper.
Me
personally.
either.
I can't nap. It's just my body won't allow me. I like to be on with my day doing things.
Yeah.
And just, sleep at night.
Or maybe he's one of those people who, when you wake up from a nap and then you're just a bit confused and grumpy. Maybe that was the attitude he brought to Philippe Chatrier, which is hardly bringing your best to the table. But I do think that I disagree with Tsitsipas, who said that Alcaraz was good, not exceptional. I think he was pretty exceptional on the day. So it was very impressive in my mind.
Yeah, he was getting absolutely everything back. And Tsitsipas is very consistent in Grand Slams. I think, getting to the quarters and losing to Alcaraz is not a, embarrassment by any means. Perhaps the nature of the defeat was. But I think, his backhand, I think, needs a lot of improvement if he wants to sort of break through against the top players. And I sort of feel like the word breakthrough is a bit odd when he's been in Grand Slam finals already. But, this is the reality. He's sort of got taken over by the likes of Alcaraz now in terms of likelihood of winning slams. And a bit like Khachanov, I guess, that Tsitsipas is a very consistent player. Him and Khachanov tend to get to the latter stages. Khachanov actually has made the quarterfinals in the least of quarterfinals in the last 3 slams. He's actually the only player to have made it past round 4 in all of them, which is, saying something. But yeah, what's your opinion on the Tsitsipas backhand in particular? What does he need to do to sort of get rid of this as an issue and allow him to potentially go further? I
think it's a really strange one because the grip he used in the return of serve makes it very hard to be aggressive off the return. He almost commits a bit too much to the slice or to kind of pushing it back into the court. And I also think if you give it a bit of height, it does make it quite uncomfortable for him. And I think we've seen that his head-to-head against top 10 has not been great this year at all. And the top players are able to really pick on the backhand and really do some damage. And if he's not finding his rhythm, then he's in a lot of trouble. Like I saw him play earlier in the week. He was serving very well on the day, which I think was great. It didn't look like he was serving that well. So I'd say for him, it's the backhand, but also the serve that isn't necessarily proving to be as effective as it should be. He only made 59% of first serves and only won 61% of his first serve and 47% of his second serve. So I think it's a combination where if he doesn't have or doesn't improve the backhand, and if he isn't on song for the serve, then you can see why someone like Alcaraz would be able to make his life very difficult from a returning perspective, but also from the perspective of him serving himself and not being able to get the points done and get the the third shot that he really wants.
Yeah, and I mean, let's look at. I completely agree with what you were saying about Tsitsipas's backhand there. I really do. But let's, he is unfortunately out. Sorry, any Greek or Tsitsipas fans. We do have that semi-final between Djokovic and Alcaraz lined up in the final 4. If Novak wins, he can actually replace Carlos Alcaraz as the current world number 1. If he wins the title here, which would also be obviously a record 23rd major. We do have, the last time they played, it was Alcaraz winning in the semi-final in Madrid in 2022. That match, was quite close. It was, 6-7, 7-5, 7-6 to Alcaraz. So if that's anything to go by, it's going to be a tough, tight encounter. It's the first time that they will have played in a semi-final, and it's only Alcaraz's second semi-final at a slam ever. The first, he won and went on to win the US Open. I mean, who are you going with, Chris? Who's your money on if you were a betting man?
If I was a betting man, well, I'm going to go with our listeners on this, because we did ask the question on Twitter who they thought was going to come through this one. And with a whopping 69%, it was Alcaraz. And so I just don't think there could be a better temperature check than asking our listeners there. And I'm going to say that. And as I say that now, I'm thinking I'm betting against Novak Djokovic, which is something that I don't think you ever should do. But for the sake of interest, Kim, I know you've backed Djokovic for this in the predictions. I'm going to say Alcaraz, so that I've bet against him once before. I'm not doing it again.
Yeah, bet against Novak Djokovic at your peril.
I know.
I'm personally, I really hope. Well, I hope Alcaraz wins, because I think it'll be really exciting. It's very much youth versus experience. I'd love Alcaraz to make that breakthrough. But I'm also being realistic. It's very hard to break down a 22 major champion in the latter stages of a slam. Djokovic is a very wily, seasoned, experienced opponent, very mentally strong. So it's going to be perhaps Alcaraz's toughest ask of his career. He has won the US Open, but that was in the final against Casper Ruud. He didn't have to beat one of the big three en route to winning that slam. So I think this is a tougher test.
Way tougher
than even winning that Grand Slam final. So I don't know how much we can read into the head-to-head. It's going to be a really fascinating encounter come Friday. Hopefully it will live up to the hype, because it's what we've all been sort of earmarking since that draw was done. But we do have another semi-final also lined up, which is Sasha Zverev against Casper Ruud. Just a note on Sasha Zverev, he's back at this stage of a Grand Slam for the first time since he had to very emotionally depart from the semi-final here a year ago in a wheelchair, when he slipped over and injured his ankle against Rafa in that semi-final that he was doing so well in. He won in 4 sets against Thomas Echeverry of Argentina. So Zverev, putting some form together here to come back to this stage of a Grand Slam. Very emotional in his win today. How did you think, generally he played, and how do you think he has been playing? Do you think he can make it all the way into his second Grand Slam final?
Yeah, before the tournament, did I think that Zverev would make it back to the semi-finals in Paris? I really didn't. I didn't think he had the form. He was kind of losing a lot of those close matches, especially kind of against Medvedev, and he was losing to players that you wouldn't expect him to lose to. So for me, this is quite a big surprise, and I think it's one that I don't think he's obviously surprised because he's been here before, but he didn't play for 7 months. And then when he did start playing, there was still start training again, there still was some pain. So he really, really, really hurt himself. And I think when you have that sort of a setback, it is so difficult to kind of regain your form. We've seen that with sort of a Dominic Thiem. But getting wheeled off in a wheelchair after really pushing Nadal in that semi-final, I think that was I remember thinking at the time that's going to be so hard to mentally deal with, just how unlucky you've been. And it seems like he's channeled that to put something really brilliant together here, because he's had a tough draw. Compared to, if you look at who Kasper's had to play, Malkin is someone he made look very average in the second round. He only lost, I think it was 7 games. And then Tiafoe is obviously a higher ranked player than himself at the moment. And then Dimitrov, he made that very easy with I think that was 8 games. So he's really playing well, and Echeverry's had great form. So I think he's got a real shot at getting to the final. I do think, though, whoever makes the final from the top half is going to pick up the trophy. But I would not be against sign of a Zverev redemption arc here, because he was so unlucky last year. And I think it's great to see him in the semi-finals and finally getting some form again, because it's never nice watching someone who can play a lot better not be able to bring that game.
Yeah, I think it's almost the story it has been made, and it's sort of fitting based on that awful departure he had last year. And I agree in the sense that I think whoever wins out of Alcaraz Djokovic is likely to win the title, but you never know what's going to happen in a tennis match, so you've got to make sure you're in that position and be
You've got
there
to win the match,
compete.
yes, in front of you.
So nothing's a given. And, we know what happened with Zverev last year. It was sort of a bit of a freak thing where he sort of fell over and injured his ankle. So you just never know what's going to happen in a match. And I think that he probably is the favourite over Casper Ruud in the semi-final. I think there's like momentum more behind Zverev. Casper Ruud obviously has been to the final at Roland Garros before. He came, up against Holger Rune and won in 4 sets tonight. Holger Rune kind of fighting back to get that third set, but Casper Ruud holding him off and getting the job done and avoiding a 5th set. And I know it's really nice that Casper Ruud's been able to find form here. He's had a very difficult start to the season, but managed to kind of get back into a bit of his groove here, especially against Holger Rune. He's had a great clay court season. But I feel like Casper Ruud isn't quite doing it for me. Holger Rune today didn't really turn up. He was out of sorts for the first 2 sets, I thought. Didn't play great. So I feel like a part of this victory for Ruud was kind of Rune not at the races. I don't know what you thought, Chris, because obviously I know you're a bit of a Holger Rune fanatic. Oh, you're waving a Danish flag at me, and you're wearing a Danish football shirt.
I am. I'm a bit gutted, Kim. I really made the effort today. I had some people around, was waving my flag. I'm fully dressed up for this, and but I do think, in fairness to Casper, those first 2 sets, he played fine, but he did play really well in the final set, I think. And Holger did really raise his game in that 3rd set. But it was one of the weirdest contests I've seen, because no one would have thought that a competitor like Holger Rune wouldn't have turned up at all for that first set. Was almost just, it was almost, we thought it would be done in about an hour and 15, that whole match. So I do think he did play a pretty high level. I really liked the fact that he was coming into the net quite a lot. He was varying his play, some great drop shots, great shape on his forehand, and it was one of those performances from Casper where you just wonder why he's had so many terrible losses this year, because it all looks like it won't go off the rails. And then I think it is just in those key moments sometimes where he's at break point, or he's serving for a match, or he's in a major final. And this is probably where I do agree with you, that I think that Sasha probably is the favourite in this sense, because that was probably one of the most one-sided finals we've ever seen last year. And I think that's something which does show that, in the same thing against Alcaraz, that there's been a couple of those big opportunities that he hasn't been able to necessarily bring his best game. And obviously it was much closer in the US Open, but I do sort of question marks about those key moments, because he did sort of let Holger back into this match. He was 6-1, 6-2, and then looking like he might be pushing ahead in that 3rd set as well. So he's not necessarily the best closer, and I think that someone who's as seasoned as Zverev and really hungry for it might be the person I think might come through that one. Yeah,
I just kind of feel that, Ruud is... Obviously he is hungry. He wants to win a Grand Slam, but there's just that sort of extra je ne sais quoi lacking for me when I watch Casper Ruud. But obviously he is a fabulous player and got the job done. Is very professional all the time, and generally very consistent. Obviously, aside from the tour generally this year so far, he's sort of got back to winning ways at Roland Garros on the clay. It is a bit of a shame that Holger Rune couldn't go further, given that his good performances on the clay generally this season. He'll be looking towards the grass, obviously, and we'll have to look at how he sort of progresses onto the grass. But I think overall I think he has had a great clay season. So, all is not lost, Chris. You can still wear your Danish football shirt, I'm sure, and cheer Holger Rune on
at Wimbledon. Will it be allowed? I'm sure this will violate the dress code. There's a lot of red on it.
Oh, there's too much red. I'm sorry. You're going to have to, support in other ways.
I can't wave a flag. I have to take the fabric off. Take the stick off, yes.
Yeah. As I said, one of my friends, she tried to get the Spanish flag into Wimbledon, wasn't allowed, so she made a flag dress. So maybe you could make a Danish flag outfit, Chris.
That's a great idea.
Look forward to seeing that.
And then I'll find
Wimbledon.
out that Holger's drawn against a Brit, and I'll have to scrap it completely.
Where will your loyalties lie?
I know.
So, who are you saying against? Was Zverev against Casper Ruud? Who's your money on for that one?
These are both very tricky to call, and I'm not normally someone who is on the fence, but I'm gonna go Sasha, just because I just think that he has something a bit more about him this year in terms of what I've seen from his tennis. I think he's playing better tennis, and this was Casper's first seed he's faced, and he didn't have to really play tennis in the first 2 sets, I would say. So he had a real set where he had to kind of prove his worth, but for me, I think Sasha's proved his worth versus multiple matches this tournament. What about you?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think going into the final, I think Zverev is more likely to create more of a challenge for the opponent come the final. And I think that would be a better final. I feel like I'm being very critical of Casper Ruud here, but given, I mean, you could say that Sasha Zverev hasn't had a super high caliber of opponent. He did have to beat, Francis Tiafoe, so that was obviously a sort of fairly tricky encounter. But Echeverry is obviously a seasoned clay courter as well, albeit out unseeded. But I think Zverev would probably give us a better, more competitive final. But that's all, all very well me saying that. I look forward to both matches. I think they're going to be intriguing for their own reasons come Friday. So I think it's an intriguing lineup that we have here. And for many people, who are used to supporting, Rafa in this tournament, I think, from a neutral perspective, it's also quite an interesting matchup that we've got. So I hope the crowd get behind it and we get, a nice respectful crowd, but also some very high level competitive tennis come the men's semis on Friday. We'll be taking a look at the women's semis after a very quick break, but so join us in the second half to reflect back on all the women's quarterfinal action, and we'll also give, I think, a very quick update on Collect a Set as well as we head into the latter stages of the French Open, so do not go anywhere. Welcome back to the Tennis Weekly podcast, sponsored by downloadtennis.com. And we're going to move on to the women's quarterfinal action. We have now got our semi-final lineup as a result of the women's quarterfinals. We have had a number of matches over the last 2 days. We've got a semi-final between Iga Swiatek and Beatriz Haddad Maia lined up, as well as one between Karolina Muchova and Aryna Sabalenka. So essentially, the top 2 seeds are still in the women's draw, and we're very much on course for another Swiatek-Sabalenka matchup. Let's take a look at those quarterfinals in turn, though. The first of which, let's have a look at Karolina Muchova against Anastasia Pavlyuchenkova. This was actually straight sets in the end. In fact, all of the quarterfinals were straight sets except for one of them. Karolina Muchova making only her second major semi-final of her career, defeating a former finalist here at the French Open. And can I just say, I had Sakkari in my semi-final, but Muchova beat Sakkari in the first round and she's gone all the way to the semi. So I kind of feel somewhat vindicated, Chris.
Yes.
Don't know if you agree with me on that one.
I can sort of see that there, but I do remember, prior to joining the podcast, I'd love to listen to your predictions at the start of the year as to who was going to win different tournaments of the slams. And you actually did say a couple of years ago that Muchova would win the French.
Oh my gosh.
I remember that.
I knew I predicted big for her once upon a time.
You really did.
And didn't know it was a French.
And I just thought, why wouldn't you predict it on the grass? I thought, surely she made a mistake there. But who knows? Did Kim predict this years ago prior to her being sidelined by injury? But yeah, I mean, it's the second time that she'd beaten Sakkari very early in the French and very similar scorelines. And it seems that she's just kind of built on that since then. And there are some real parallels with the Zverev story here, because she not only was also kind of wheeled off, caught in a wheelchair last year, but she also has been sidelined for 6 months prior to that. And it's a really tricky time for her from an injury perspective, because anyone who's a fan of the WTA Tour will know that she is the queen of the highlight reel. Some of the shots she hits are absolutely fantastic, and her tennis is so all court. It's really, really entertaining to watch. And I think in this one, she just had a bit too much variety for Pavlyuchenkova, who was obviously also coming back from injury. But still a fantastic effort from Pavlyuchenkova to make it to this stage. But it is fantastic to have Mukova in the semi-finals, because she is someone who will kind of break up some of the patterns of play, because we did see in some previous matches with Sabalenka that it is just kind of slogging it out from the baseline. And we'll talk about that with the Svitolina match. But I think this could provide what could make for a very interesting contest by giving her some very different balls, very different slices, top spins. And I think that would be something that could potentially cause some problems for Sabalenka and break up the pace. But do you think that Mukova, do you stand by your prediction, is what I should ask him?
What, my prediction from 3 years ago. Yeah. Oh, is this a new prophecy? Yeah, new renaissance. I mean, yeah, you could arguably say it is a renaissance for Mukova's career. I think it's interesting that there's a lot of parallels with Sasha Zverev, actually. They both went off court in a wheelchair because of an ankle injury that they got here a year ago. I think, well, imagine if they both ended up winning the tournament. What sort of, I don't know, justice would that be a year on, in a way? Mukova herself, she was down to world ranking of 235 last summer. So the fact that she's sort of back up to 40 odd in the world and getting to this stage of a Grand Slam is fantastic. She definitely belongs at these sort of stages of Grand Slams. Her ranking will no doubt go up again, and she'll sort of be able to get back into sort of more tournaments and progress through. But I think, so there's interesting storylines with her and Zverev, especially. Her and Sabalenka, Sabalenka, they have played, I think, once before. Sabalenka leads the head-to-head, but they played back, in 2019. So quite a while ago. It was a bit of a close one as well. So I think this one could go all the way, perhaps. It could be a very tight semi-final. Mukova's variety may just be the thing that unsettles, Sabalenka. Mukova's only dropped one set all the way along to this stage. And I think that she has the sort of willpower to overcome Sabalenka, who, has been playing very well. And I can see her also getting to semis. But, I think it's hard to dislike Mukova and the journey that she's
definitely someone who on. Deserves, to be in the top 10, because when she is on, she does make it deep in majors and she can produce some fantastic results. So I would love to see a really good contest there, because, as you say, we have been denied some 3-set epics on the women's side, and I do think that I don't want to say this, but I do think we might not be having too many 3 sets in the semi-finals.
I mean, Mukova will be playing Aryna Sabalenka. She came through in straight sets against Alina Svitolina, 6-4, 6-4. Unfortunately, this match has been overshadowed by what happened at the end of the match, so we're probably inevitably going to be talking about that instead of the actual tennis. Our Twitter sort of lit up with comments and feedback as a result of what happened at the end of the match. For those of you who maybe haven't sort of been following so closely, Sabalenka essentially went to the net at the end of the match to sort of wait at the net to shake hands with Alina Svitolina. Alina Svitolina, being Ukrainian, obviously isn't shaking hands with players from Russia and Belarus, so was just going straight to the umpire. The French crowd kind of saw this, thought Svitolina was, I guess, snubbing Sabalenka, booed Svitolina. So a lot of unsavoury atmosphere at the end of the match. And then a lot of people saying, why on earth did Sabalenka go to the net? She must have known that Svitolina wasn't going to shake her hand. And by Sabalenka going to the net and sort of waiting there, she was kind of making a point of it, kind of almost inciting the crowd to boo Svitolina. And it's just been really sort of negative and a bit nasty, I think, from the crowd. Like, obviously, they've been booing people in this situation all tournament, it seems, for various reasons and standpoints. So, Chris, I mean, it's a difficult one, isn't it? What did you make of how the end of the match happened? I know it's bad that we're not talking about the tennis, but this is kind of the main talking point that's come out since this match. Do you think Sabalenka was in the wrong to sort of way to the net like she did?
I think, given the fact that Sabalenka has said in her previous press conferences that she felt unsafe, and then she actually had a couple of closed press conferences, which invite only, I do think that it was a very odd message to send. She said it was an instinct to go to the net, but as soon as she won, she went straight to the net and almost leaned over the net with both hands on the net. And I think, and I'm with Svitolina when it comes to that, she didn't know what she was waiting for. I mean, she knew the handshake wasn't coming. She's played Marta Kostyuk in the first round, I believe. Svitolina's made it very clear, and I'm sure that Sabalenka in press has been asked about these sorts of things multiple times. And so I think for me, it did send a message that she wanted Svitolina to have to be seen to refuse the handshake, because obviously that is what Svitolina has decided to do. So I see it from the perspective that she just didn't want to be booed. And it's in that sense, she's seen Kasatkina booed, who didn't approach the net. And then she got booed because it looked like she wasn't shaking Svitolina's hand. So it's almost the boo or be booed, or avoiding the boos, it seems like, because it did seem a little bit sinister to me, because it would be quite easy to do the thumbs up like happened previously. And would you rather, for the press or the PR of it, have Svitolina booed from Ukraine, or just take a boo yourself and move on because you've obviously won the match as well? It felt a bit unnecessary, and it kind of has obviously made Sabalenka's press conferences even more probably antagonistic in terms of asking these questions. So it's done the opposite of what she was saying that she wanted. So for me, I think it's a difficult one, but I do think it was strange behaviour.
Yeah, I mean, in Sabalenka's defence, she sort of said, I'm so used to just shaking hands at the end of a match, I didn't think. And maybe you would be a bit on autopilot, but going to the net and waiting for your opponent to shake the hand is an usual activity at the end of the match. So she said it was like very much an instinct. And I can kind of get that. Maybe you don't always think, I'm constantly, you don't think I'm playing a Ukrainian. That isn't sort of the first thing in your mind. So perhaps it was a genuine mistake to give her the benefit of the doubt.
It did seem odd, though, I did think, in terms of the speed she got to the net and the way she was leaning over the net, and then the smile to her camp after the boos. I just felt it was all not good and sent a bit of the wrong message, because some people say it's about giving Svitolina the chance to refuse it, or trying to see if there's a chance that you might have a handshake. But for me, it just felt like it was really trying to make the point that not only she won the match, but she also had the victory when it came to making someone refuse the handshake, I think was the point.
Yeah, almost sort of trying to get the moral high ground.
Yeah, I think it was that. That's a good way of phrasing it.
Yeah, I mean, there is an argument to say, like, if you're prepared to step on a tennis court and play a match against someone you don't fundamentally like or agree with politically, you should be willing to undertake all the facets of that match, and so be it, you would handshake at the end of the match. It's all very well you're playing a tennis match against this person, but if you're not willing to shake their hand, should you even be on the court? I mean, there's an argument to say that if, for Ukrainian players, just get on with it and shake the hands. It's a tennis match. We're not trying to bring politics into sport, yet you're trying to by refusing to shake hands. It's a very tricky one. And I mean, fundamentally, I don't think the French crowd should be booing
agreed.
For any of these situations, whether it's someone's intent or not to make the crowd boo or to make a player look rude or something. The French crowd haven't put themselves in the best light by booing in all these situations. And it means we're talking about this rather than the actual tennis,
but the
which
tennis,
is a shame.
I have to say, was very high quality. I think both women were fired up, and I've not seen someone hit the ball that hard and that consistently in for some time. And I think that Sabalenka was unbelievably impressive from a tennis perspective. And I genuinely think that Svitolina's comeback has been very, very impressive in terms of the way that she's playing. I think against almost anyone else, I would have probably backed her to get a win, even if she was playing against some of the other top players, because she is being more aggressive, whereas Sabalenka just hit the cover off the ball and she couldn't get on the front foot at all. And she defended really, really well. Did get a break up in the second, but a couple of points here and there kind of lost her the match. But I would say this match was, for a 2-set 6-4, 6-4, highly entertaining and fantastic tennis. So if we're talking tennis, Kim, it was great tennis.
Yeah, just unfortunately overshadowed by the end of the match. But it has been really pleasing to see Svitolina back at this stage of a Grand Slam, and so quickly after coming back onto the tour. So we look forward to seeing what she can do at the Slams, going forwards. And I mean, let's look at the other semi-final now lineup that we've got, because we've got Beatrix Haddad Maia against the top seed Iga Swiatek. Haddad Maia winning in 3 sets today over Ons Jabeur. She is now the first Brazilian woman into the semi-finals here since 1966. 1968 even. I've given her an extra 2 years there. My bad. But yeah, this was a 3-set match against Ons Jabeur. Haddad Maia had never been beyond the second round of a major, and now she's gone all the way into the second round, to the semi-finals. So very much earning, her place here with some, long matches. That one against Saras Ribas Tormo, some hard fought wins, coming back from a set down against Ons Jabeur today as well. What did you make of her performance? This was, she could very easily have gone Ons Jabeur's way in, went to a second set tie break, could have been done in 2 sets for Jabeur, but it never went there, and she never got the job done.
Yeah, I think this is the sort of Ons performance that just makes you despair, because all the talent in the world, but she does let her body language and the way that she lets her head drop really affect her performance. And it's very understandable. You don't always break serve. You might miss a break point. And when she was 3-6 and a break point for 5-6 in the second, you do kind of feel like that could be a real chance for her to get that match, and she could have got that done in 2. But I think not getting that break then kind of led to the situation where in the tie break it was very cagey. She was not making good shot choices, and Haddad Maia in that tie break was very, very edgy as well. So I think that tie break was the real decider there, and it did remind me of the Wimbledon final where it was on Ons's racket, where she was up that first set. She started the second set not badly. And then she just mentally kind of drifted away the longer the match went on. And if it's a case of wanting it too much, but not being able to deal with the disappointment of not getting it done in 2, or your level dropping, or not being happy with how you're playing, I think it really was a case where, from a spectator perspective, it almost looked like she might need a medical timeout, because everything changed about her demeanour. So very, very frustrating for Ons fans. But from a Haddad Maia perspective, never been past the second round of a slam. This is the result that she needed really to justify being ranked as high as 12 in the world at one point. So very, very impressive from her side, especially given the fact that she spent, I think it's 12 hours and 42 minutes on court, which is the longest that anyone has spent in a single tournament this season, which is very, very impressive. And she's come back from deficits. Match point down against Alexandrova. She was 7-6, 3-love down, and 2 points for the 4-love, as well as in a real sort of position of jeopardy against Ons. So take nothing away from her performance, because all those hours in the gym, all those hours on her fitness, and all those hours of recovery from when she was injured have really led her to be one of the most physically fit people and hardest to put away, because she has that mental resolve that probably no one else can rival on the tour.
Yeah, she has great endurance on a tennis court. You know, she's been down a lot, as you said, in many of her matches, but fought her way through. And it's almost, you know, she's playing a player who has done the polar opposite and barely spent any time on court at all in the semi-final is Iga Swiatek. You know, she has been sort of floating her way through the draw, really, for the loss of barely any games. It seems quite reminiscent of the times previously when she's won her slams where she hasn't dropped many games or sets at all. The latest of which, Iga Swiatek beating Coco Gauff 6-4, 6-2. You know, very comfortable, pretty much a repeat of the final last year. Coco Gauff has never beaten Swiatek. She's 0-7 now. And I find it hard to see Haddad Maia being able to topple Swiatek, given just the time they've spent on court and the sort of nature of their sort of pathways through to this stage. I think Swiatek is obviously going in as the overwhelming favourite, but also just the physically and mentally the fresher of the two. And I think once it gets to this stage of the tournament, that does, you know, I think count for quite a lot when you get to the latter stages and the sort of real crunch time. And I know Iga's had a few, you know, iffy moments like early on, but she's done what she's needed to done, and she's now looking really, really quite good, isn't she, Chris?
Yeah, she really is. And I think it's a case where the nature of playing at Roland Garros is so different to the last time they played at the Canadian Open for Haddad Maia and Iga, because she did win that and did upset Iga at that tournament. But this is almost like on Iga's home court, in the sense that she's so well adjusted to life on a clay court, especially at Roland Garros, and she's had so much more experience at this level. So I do think it's very different getting kind of an early round win in the last 16 at a Masters versus a semi-final of a slam when you've never been past the second round. I mean, it's a big ask, and based on what I've seen of Iga, she made short work of Coco Gauff. It was more competitive in the final last year because there was that 6-4 opening set and there was some great exchanges early on. But I do wonder, Kim, this was really billed as the ticket of the quarterfinals. But I mean, she's not ever beaten Iga, and it's always been pretty straightforward. So I guess my question would be, was this ever going to deliver against the hype? Because it literally went as you'd expect, maybe a couple more games for Coco than you would have thought. But was this the match of the quarterfinals?
You mean Swiatek against Coco Gauff being the match of the quarterfinals?
Well, before it took place, people really were excited for this one and
building it up. Yeah. I mean, I kind of thought this is probably going to be a fairly predictable match, so I wasn't I was more interested for like Sabalenka-Svitolina, I think,
I agree,
to see how Svitolina was going to get on against a player that's, you know, now, you know, top ranked and arguably, well, you know, has done more than Svitolina really by winning a slam. So I think this one, I didn't see Coco Gauff really having the tools to actually get the win here. You know, we saw how we said in the last podcast how consistent Coco Gauff is against players, you know, outside of the top 50. But when she gets up against fellow top 10 players, you know, she just loses her. She pretty much loses the match. You know, she's lost her last 7 matches against top teners, and she just isn't able at the moment to get those big wins. Hence, I kind of thought this was the predictable outcome, unfortunately. But I think she's obviously had a good tournament generally. She's played herself into some better form than what we'd seen over the clay court season. So I think there's positives to take from this, but she needs to really look at what she can do to elevate herself to become a contender for the tournament rather than someone who's going to sort of meekly go out to the top seed, because no one really wants to be in that sort of situation, do they?
Yeah, she wants to be in the mix, and I think that she's made some strides this tournament. She's been taking the ball a lot earlier, and she's been hitting her forehand much better than she has recently. So I think there are lots of positives. As you say, it's that top 10 record that's the problem. You really do need to be in the top 10, beating top 10 players to be in the mix and to give yourself shots at tournaments. And this was a tough draw because obviously it was a final last year. But I do think that if she can get a decent draw at Wimbledon and a good grass court season, I do think she's on a very positive upward trajectory coming out of this quarterfinal.
I mean, who do you think we're going to see in our final? out of that, we've got, Swiatek, Haddad Maia, Muchova, Sabalenka. Are we going to see the top 2 seeds there, do you think?
It'd be tough to bet against it. I really do think that. I think watching how Sabalenka overpowered Svitolina, even Muchova being able to handle the pace, it's very hard to mix up the pace of such a hard ball. And Haddad Maia, even on her best day, Iga has a much higher A game level. So I'm going to go with you. I think your prediction was also in a Swiatek Sabalenka final. So it looks like, Kim, your predictions once again are pulling through.
Oh, maybe so. I mean, I think actually, given the women's game over the last few years, having a final between the top 2 seeds is probably a very rare occasion on the women's tour. So it would actually be quite nice, I think, just for that alone. Looking at the order of play tomorrow, going into Thursday, we have got Muchova, Sabalenka up first, I think, followed then by Swiatek, Haddad Maia. I'm loving the women's legends that we've got on the schedule tomorrow. We've got Kim Clijsters playing doubles with Caroline Wozniacki. You can wear your Denmark shirt for that one, Chris.
I've been streaming the legends, Kim. I was watching this morning Hanchikova playing with Natalie Deshi, who's my grandfather's favourite tennis player. So it was my favourite and my grandfather's favourite playing today. And that was great fun.
Perfect.
So I say put Clijsters and Wozniacki, Panetta, Schiavone, put them as the night session. Tonight was the final night session, but add another one. We'd love to see them playing tennis in prime time.
Yeah, they're up against Panetta and Schiavone, the Italians. Both Grand Slam champions. Schiavone,
who's getting that one, Kim?
Tournament.
If I had to make a prediction,
I'll go for the Italians.
I'll go for the Italians as well.
Hardcore clay court is
probably
there.
played together before.
Yeah, we've got the mixed doubles final as well. We've got Kato, who was defaulted from her women's doubles, with Tim Puetz up against Bianca Andreescu and Michael Venus.
Two great stories there.
Yeah, Andreescu may be getting another slam.
Who would have thought it was
doubles.
not on my bingo card, Kim, that the next slam that Bianca Andreescu might win after the 2019 US Open, the 2023 French Open mixed doubles? No.
Well, that's the joy of mixed doubles. It always throws up some interesting, scratch pairings and, random rogue results. That's why we love it. Talking of maybe, results of a competition, we do have a collector set update as well, which is very exciting. Tom Bryant was out in the lead because he had 2 correct answers, but given the latest batch of results, we have got an update, and we've got a bit of a tie. Which is exciting, haven't we, Chris?
We have indeed. We have got a tie. It seemed like Tom had this in the bag, but after a very late surge from Liz Curran, who managed to take the last 2 points of the day with quarterfinal predictions for both Holger Rune and Coco Gauff, that's led to a 2-way tie on 3 points. So it's still not quite the 6 points we're looking for in terms of collectively, it's a 6 points. From both of them. So we will be having a tie break. So we'll be in touch with both of you to answer a tie break question, and then we will reveal the winner once we have the final taken place. So Liz and Tom, look out in your DMs because we will be asking for another prediction from you. Most commonly, we go for games lost by losing finalists. So we will give you plenty of time to come up with something, but we will also clarify the question.
Yes, yeah, get your thinking caps on. Thank you to everyone who has taken part. Liz and Tom, well done. You've made it this far.
We didn't, did we, Kim?
We didn't, no. You definitely
we got Norrie round 3, nothing else. All of us got a Holger wrong. Semi-final, final and a win. So the slam spoons of shame, we might have to go to a vote on that because I think we all deserve them.
Yeah. Yes, I think slam spoons of shame.
Dish them out to everyone. Serve them out to everyone.
As long as I can eat something nice with my spoon. I'm thinking, chocolate pudding or something.
Lovely.
But yes, listeners, we'll be revealing the results of Collector Set on our finals pod. But we will very excitingly, obviously, be back after the semi-finals once we know our finalists to chat through all the main talking points from the semi-finals. Chris, it's been a delight to chat through the quarters with you this evening. I'm still buzzing after my quiz night victory, and
rightly
it's been,
so, Kim.
Thank
An Ottolenghi
you.
signed cookbook. I mean, what a wonderful Wednesday.
I know. I can't wait to make, exciting vegetable.
Well, you can use your
concoctions.
spoon of shame for that one, can't you? As a stirring spoon.
That is very cheap. Maybe I could do some kind of French-inspired recipe for the weekend with my spoon of shame.
Stay tuned.
I'll share the products
The
of
recipe
that
involves
on our,
a slam spoon
on our
of shame.
Instagram. But listeners, I hope you've enjoyed our latest episode here at the Tennis Weekly podcast. Do remember to subscribe to us to stay up to date on all of the action still to come from the French Open. We are, of course, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all major podcasting platforms out there. And if you like what you're hearing, then do make sure to leave us a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify.
You can also follow us on social media or email the show. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and now TikTok. And that's all at Tennis Weekly Pod. You can email the show at tennisweeklypod@gmail.com or check out our website, tennisweekly.co.uk.
And we'll be back on Friday at Tennis Weekly HQ for our semi-final French Open catch-up. So I hope you can join us for that one. But in the meantime, it's goodbye from Chris.
Goodbye.
And it's goodbye from myself. So we will see you again very soon.